now been joined by a panel of prominent politicians, a triumvirate of tribunes. They are David Davis, who is MP for Halton Price and Howden, also one of the Conservative Party's biggest backbench beasts. I'm sort of hooked on alliteration by the sound of me at the moment. Brian Paddock is here. I should say the Lord Paddock, Baron Paddock, former Lib Dem London mayoral candidate and a former police commander in the Metropolitan Police. And Lucy Powell is here too, Shadow Minister for Children and Childcare. Labour MP also from Manchester Central. Welcome and thanks for coming in. David Davis, can I just come to you first? We've been talking a moment ago about Labour's new policy on the top rate of tax and more widely the question of how important is it if they are gambling with their credibility with business, risking being seen as an anti-business party. Your party, there are some issues there too. You are siding in this argument, if you like, with, in the eyes of many, many people, the richest, the best off. And a party of business, which you would clearly wish your party to forever be seen as being, a party of business also has to be seen as the party of people, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. But the argument that I guess George Osborne will make if he was sitting here, rightly, is that what they're about is attracting investment, attracting jobs, attracting more growth to the economy, and that involves helping business. So that's not really a problem. I mean, the last time I was on your programme, I think it was just after Ed Miliband raised the energy issue, and I said at the time that it was economically illiterate but politically astute. Quoted later as politically cute for some reason, but never mind. But and that's exactly what this is about. This is the same. This is a game of politics played with rather dumb economics.
Yeah, but meanwhile, elsewhere in the background, you've got this sort of briefing assault on Margaret Hodge, who may not be massively widely known in the country, but is reasonably well known as chairman of select committees of the House of Commons go. She's been giving these top business leaders an awful time over tax avoidance, and apparently those around George Osborne have been saying she's going to damage Britain's prospects, going to drive business away. Now, it seems a bit heavy-handed, maybe even counterproductive. You're a former chair of that committee, David. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if it's true they're doing it, then it's dumb. I mean, every government's tempted. The chairman of the Public Accounts Committee is a pretty prominent select committee chairman, and if they brief that, then it's just silly, because actually what she has been saying on Vodafone and other issues, none of them have picked an argument with. I mean, who's been at the front of the pack, hunting down, waving his sickle, hunting down the tax avoiders? It's been George Osborne. Yeah. So it's a pretty dumb line of attack.
So where would this come from? You call it dumb, you call it silly, and what sort of material harm might it do?
Well, it would draw attention to the whole question of this was couched as it will make people not choose to lodge their businesses in Britain. Well, I could pick a better reason not to do it, and that is you've got a set of taxation policies now that mean the government can change its mind, the revenue can change its mind about the tax policy after you put your tax return in. Well, that's not very clever either. So I think it's an unwise attack, probably part of a general attack off the back of Davos on Labour for being anti-business. That's not a stupid attack, but doing it this way is.
Brian Paddock.
Well, we have to look at what the coalition government have done, and that is to take people out of income tax altogether until they earn £10,000. So it's not as if the coalition government have only looked after the rich and not looked after the low and middle income earners. As David has said, the priority has to be at the moment to create more jobs. We need more entrepreneurs. We need more investors. We need more inward investment. And anything that's likely to scare that off is not a good idea. Yeah. And Liberal Democrats are quite clear on this policy. We had a debate on it at our last conference, our autumn conference, and we voted, albeit narrowly, to keep the 45p and not to increase it to 50p.
Your texts are coming in. Do please tell us what you're thinking. Share your thoughts with us. I mean, this is from Ernie in Kenilworth. He says, I'm a businessman who doesn't earn £150,000, but I'm working bloody hard to get there, and I don't want Labour anywhere near it. I guess there'll be others in similar positions who may agree with that. A vast majority of pensioners are struggling at this moment. The rich people earning over £124,000 should be paying 50% tax, and companies such as energy companies, coffee companies and distribution companies should pay tax. That's Peter. Arthur in Brighton, thanks for your text. He says Labour is selling untruths according to frequent reports. The highest taxpayers are already paying more than they did under Labour, even though the highest rate of personal tax has gone down by 5%. All they have to do is follow France and watch Britain go down the tube. What are they going to do if 10% of the highest paying 1% of taxpayers decide to leave the country? How will they make up the 3% of lost tax income? We'll trust your figures on that one, Arthur. Now, tell us what you think. 85058. Lucy Powell is here with us as well, of course. Labour's Shadow Minister for Children, frontbencher, member of the team that speaks for the party. Labour lurching to the left. That's been a charge against Ed Miliband and the party, which may or may not resonate with a lot of people who may well have forgotten or simply be too young to know anything about the 70s and all of that sort of stuff. But Labour trust on the economy, that does matter, doesn't it? And you're taking a risk?
Well, I think what's absolutely critical about what Ed Balls has said this weekend is the context of what he's saying as to why he would increase the top rate of tax to 50p. And the context is that he has said we will eliminate the deficit in the next Parliament and get the country back running a surplus. And why has he had to say that? Because, George Osborne, he made his entire economic platform, his entire plan around eliminating the deficit by 2015, which he's not even going to be halfway towards now in 2015. So we are going to inherit a deficit.
You're going to stick with the coalition's plans for the first year after the election, if you're in a position
spending
to take those decisions. You say you'll eliminate the deficit, what's left of it, and a lot's left of it in the course of the next Parliament. The clear implication, if you can call it an implication, it's just obvious that there would be pain and suffering and austerity along the way. The tone of what you're saying, in the form of Ed Balls and others, is that it wouldn't be necessarily terribly painful. It's all a bit Hollande-ish, isn't it? It's a little bit like the French president and what he promised before he came in, and we saw how that's ended up.
Not at all. I think we've said everything's got to be was going to be really tough decisions about what we have to do when we come into.
You're going to cut severely the current spending budget. That means wages. That means those employed in the public sector, for example. So we're going to see, aren't we, under a Labour government, we could expect to see protests on the streets and strikes and Len McCluskey and the public service unions going after you every bit as much as they've gone after this coalition. Well,
let's hope not. We'll wait and see. But I think the point of what we've said this weekend is that the deficit needs to be reduced and will be reduced under us. And therefore, part of that package of how we bring down the deficit will mean that those with the broadest shoulders need to pay their fair share. And that's why that's such a critical sort of policy.
But just here on behalf of the party, as the voice of the party tonight here at that green microphone in this studio, you don't mind the idea of taking on Len McCluskey and the PCS and all the rest. I know I sound like one of those guys in school playgrounds offering to hold everyone's coat while they have a fight, and I sort of am doing that. But you don't mind having a fight with these guys.
Well, we're used to negotiating our way through these issues. So I hope that whatever tough decisions we have to take in terms of the public sector, we'll be able to do that. Round the table. We'll have to wait and see. But we have said that we will be doing a zero-based spending review. That means we're looking at every nuance, every little part of spending, every big part of spending, and making sure that we can eliminate that deficit. And part of that is also about reducing, our welfare expenditure, which means getting more people back to work, getting more people earning more when they're in work, so that the vast majority
Caroline Crampton, you follow these things very closely. You write for the New Statesman. Lucy sounds very convincing, doesn't she? So why is Labour trailing on this question of economic credibility in opinion poll after opinion poll?
I think it's a difficult thing to judge, but I think this is one of the first big announcements we've had from Labour on tax. I think people beyond the kind of Westminster bubble are going to maybe not understand in full, but really get hold of. So I think this could be, I expect they're hoping, a turning point for them. It's a crucial point this far out from the election.
Do you sense it might be a turning point?
I think it might be. I think it depends. I was relating to you earlier. I had an interesting experience in my cab on the way here where someone was saying to me that they thought this meant Labour was going to take half of their money straight off. So I think there's probably still some explaining to do, but it is cutting through to people.
Well, there'll be a lot of explaining to do because this is, economically illiterate again. And actually, Ed Balls will know this. What we've seen with the reduction to 45p is actually the amount of tax collected going up. That's what's actually happened.
No, well, figures out today have shown a different thing. They've actually shown that what the government produced at the time they announced the policy of cutting it were incorrect, and that actually £10 billion was raised, £10 billion more, was raised from the top rate of tax, and the government had said that it had been at the time that it cut. So let's just put that into context. That's £10 billion that we could have taken off the deficit over the last 3 years.
30 years, if you want. Every single time top rates of tax go down, the take goes up, and that's
is that
what,
because people delay their bonuses and so on?
No, because that's the point. There's a fair point in that, but you need to look at it over several years. And the truth of the matter is, every single time, back in the Thatcher days when it came down, both reductions from 83 to 60, from 60 to 40, both led to big increases. They always do in pretty much every country in the world, which is why actually Labour, for the entire time they were in government, didn't do it.
What I love about, this always happens when you have these debates, is you get business people, you get Tories saying that rich people need to have their taxes cut all the time in order to make them work harder, whereas poor people need to have their wages cut and have their taxes rises, and they've got to expect to work harder as well. But they haven't. No, they've changed the tax allowance. The Lib Dem policy of changing the tax allowance, but in the same time they have massively cut people's tax credits. They've put up VAT. So that is why you've seen such
that sounds like the welfare cuts that you say that you are going to have to introduce if you come into government. In fact, after all this criticism of Osborne and Plan A, what Labour seem to be saying now is a continuation of Plan A if they get into government. The fact is, as you say, it was on the front page of the Liberal Democrat manifesto last time to take people out of income tax until they reach the £10,000 earnings, and that's exactly what has happened. And we have got Vince Cable now asking for a review of the minimum wage to make sure that is keeping pace with the economic climate. So I can't see how a criticism, particularly of the Liberal Democrats, that they don't care about low and medium earners can be substantiated.
Well, I'll tell you what, most of my constituents don't even earn £10,000 a year, so they're not
paying tax at all. That's great.
No, they've seen their tax credits cut, they've seen VAT go up, they've seen their energy bills go up. These people are a lot worse off than they were 3 years ago, and you just don't realise that.
For just a moment, I'm especially glad, always am glad to see you, Brian Paddock, but especially this evening, because I want to talk about the Liberal Democrats.
We're a bit elusive
when
it comes to microphones.
Well, you have been a little bit elusive, actually, during this week, but leave that here. You've turned up, so bless you for that. And if you've come around to seeing the Liberal Democrats as a serious political party, and let's be fair, they are a party of government now, more stable than most people expected at the start of the coalition, what on earth has gone wrong with the Chris Renard fiasco? Yes, there are serious issues about respect and equality for women in politics and everywhere else. But is this a controversy that had to drag the party into crisis, undermine Nick Clegg's authority, drown out anything and everything the Lib Dems might say on almost anything else? Lord Renard won't admit to sexually harassing or abusing women colleagues years ago, and the word is some expression of regret might help him draw a line. But even if he does, just listen to Lib Dems this week and it's surely clear he'll end up on the wrong side of any line between him and the kind of high authority, influence, respect he used to enjoy. And that's gotta hurt.
Got a fist of pure emotion, got a head of shattered dreams. Gotta leave it all behind now. Whatever I said, whatever I didn't mean it.
Chris Renard would need to come to the table with an open mind, and at the moment he doesn't seem to be in that mindset.
Whenever I'm wrong, just tell me the song and I'll sing it. You'll be right and understood.
The essence of mediation is that people have to agree when they've offended somebody else and apologise. You can't have a mediation that doesn't include that.
Unaware but underlined, I figured out the story. No, it wasn't good. No.
I think many people would kind of just recognise that in life there'll be things that you do, sometimes inadvertently do, slightly regardless of your motivations, that people do to each other, to their family, to their friends, to colleagues, which would cause distress. And the most human thing in the world in a situation like that It's just to say, look, whatever my motives were, I'm sorry if I've caused you distress.
Whatever I said, whatever I did, I didn't mean it. I just want you back for good.
The party is at civil war now, and the chasm is getting wider by the day. The decision today to suspend his membership makes matters worse. It just chucks fuel into the flames. And all we've got is one half chucking grenades at the other half, and back again, and we're getting nowhere. It is destroying the party.
And we'll be together. This time is forever.
One Tory MP said to one of my colleagues this morning, the funny thing about the Liberal Democrats, you managed to create a whole sex scandal without any sex.
I guess now it's time that you came back for good.
So an assortment of Liberal Democrats giving their views on this fiasco, we can call it that, in the course of the week, including Nick Clegg speaking on LBC Radio, and of course Gary Barlow, and take that in the background, giving us their analysis of the situation.
Well, it's a nice tune anyway.
And Brian Paddock of the Liberal Democrats with us in the studio. Listening to that, watching what's happened over the last week, you must be sitting with your head in your hands.
Well, at the beginning of the week, it was going from bad to worse, it has to be said. But let's get these things into perspective. Chris Renard is not accused of any criminal offence. In fact, not only did the police investigate this, they didn't even think there was enough evidence to take it to the Crown Prosecution Service. So in terms of severity, let's get it into perspective. Having said that,
but if you can
there
get
are
this
women...
Brian, if you can get into this kind of mess, as you have, over something trivial, then Lord help you when something serious comes along.
Well, it's not trivial to the women involved. This was the chief executive of the party. Some of these women, their future depended on keeping on the wrong side of Chris Renard. And
we should say he denies all wrongdoing.
On all accounts, according to this report that the independent QC has drawn up, there is credible evidence that Chris Renard at least invaded these women's personal space, and any invasion of personal space, any touching that is not that the woman doesn't want is absolutely inappropriate. Not anyway, not least because this man was in a position of power and they didn't know what to do.
And if we fast forward, as it were, to now, the strong sense is that if there was some kind of discreet mediation, if anything could be discreet in this story at this point, if there was some sort of discreet mediation followed by a form of words from Chris Renard, that would draw some kind of line. That's sort of got to be where we're heading, don't you think?
Yeah, and that's exactly why you have seen a scarcity of Liberal Democrats in the media in recent days. Because if you are going to have a mediation, if you are going to have negotiation, it's far better done behind the scenes than in front of the cameras and in front of the microphones.
How much damage to the party in a nutshell?
Well, I think when this issue is resolved, and I honestly believe that there is a will on all sides for this to be resolved, on the side of the women and on Chris Renard's side, I think when the matter is resolved, it'll be seen for what it is, which is, yes, a very unpleasant episode, but one which, in the overall scheme of things, and what voters really care about, which is about a fairer society and a stronger economy, that the Liberal Democrats can and have delivered that, and they will deliver that if voters vote for them at the next election.
That's exactly the message that's been drowned out completely this week. Lucy Powell from Labour, the Labour front bench team. How far is it fair to suggest that this thing that's happened in the Liberal Democratic Party could have happened in almost any other party, including Labour?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair enough of Brian to come on today and talk about it.
Behind the scenes.
It perhaps does happen. I mean, I think one of the sort of technicalities about this, which I think Labour learnt from the hard way in the 80s, actually, was about how you take action against members, against MPs and so on. And because of our experience with militant in the 80s, we do actually have very robust rules about how we suspend and expel members and MPs for wrongdoing in a way that doesn't have to meet the bar that the Lib Dems seem to have still have within their system, where they have to have almost a criminal level of evidence.
Which is why
they
we're
obviously need to
reviewing
look
it.
at that.
And Tim Farron, the party president, and Nick Clegg have both said that they're unhappy that is the bar, that the height of the bar, and that's why it's being reviewed.
So I think we probably learnt the hard way through the 80s, and now I'm pleased to say that we're quite swift at taking action when people have done wrongdoing.
David Davis, on this, lastly, I think on this, a lot of people are in a very uncomfortable position during this saga. I don't suggest for a second you want to see the women involved in this story in a difficult predicament, but politically, the Liberal Democrats, they're in a painful place. Are you slightly enjoying that spectacle of seeing this farcical situation?
No, not remotely. For a variety of reasons. Firstly, you've got two things in tension here. A very real and proper concern that men mostly misusing positions of power. That's what it's about. It's misuse of positions of power. It's not that somebody's sort of tap somebody on the backside or whatever who's a sort of equal at work and they can respond appropriately. This is a man for whom a response is difficult for a woman in this position.
Who denies wrongdoing?
I know. And I'm just using the general argument, not the individual argument. And against that, you've got something which actually quite properly matters to the Liberal Democrats, which is a proper level of evidence. And you're going to probably reduce it to beyond reasonable doubt to balance of probabilities or something like that. Sort of civil case. So that's for real. But I can't be the only one as well who, in this era of post-Savile, is beginning to wonder about sort of presumptions of guilt going on with people as well in this sort of crime. Now, not with this one, but generally. So there are a whole series, almost a maelstrom of problems going on here, which we've got to sort out.
Right, last couple of minutes remain, so I just want to touch on an entirely different part of the map, an entirely different scale of story. Syria. There is a big debate and a big vote coming up on Wednesday in the House of Commons. Labour is pressing the government to accept a quota under a UN umbrella, as it were, of refugees to be allowed into this country. The Liberal Democrats, and Nick Clegg in particular, we're told, have been pressing the same case behind the scenes. When you listen to William Hague, the Foreign Secretary, on the BBC this morning, well, the sides may now be reasonably close together.
Well, he did open the door, and the Home Secretary is working on that, and we'll have more to say about that in the coming days. I think there is a case for particularly helping people who are particularly vulnerable.
So that was William Hague on the Andrew Marr show earlier on. It was pretty clear, the message there, that the Prime Minister is ready to accept the idea of more refugees, David Davis, are coming into the country. We don't quite know who they may be, but people in particular need of escaping that area altogether. Is there the makings of a deal on Wednesday?
Oh, I'm sure there is. There are the makings of a deal there. But understand, this has got to be much bigger than just Britain. We're talking about millions of people here. Now, you can't bring millions of people even into the whole West. You've got to have a solution which is closer to the hand, closer in the countries surrounding it. We've got to support them. We're doing actually pretty well on that, truthfully. But there are the makings of a deal. It'll be very, very specific, very tightly drawn, I think, for people who really, really cannot safely live anywhere near Syria anymore.
Yeah, Lucy Powell, listening to what you've heard from the Prime Minister, from William Hague, are you ready to deal here and just come to some sort of agreement on the idea of letting a reasonable amount of refugees in, depending on need?
Absolutely. I
doesn't have to be under the UN umbrella, or does it?
Well, I think it has to be part of the UN kind of process, as David Davis rightly says. This has to be done in a managed way, with other countries involved. So I don't think we would really like this to be a party political issue. We've called a debate on Wednesday, and there will be a vote at the end of that debate. But it would be much better if this is done. This is something that is done with the agreement of all parties across the House. And I think I actually get a sense that is the view of the House of Commons generally when this issue has come up.
It came up at Prime Minister's questions a couple of days ago, and it wasn't a point-scoring, finger-jabbing exercise. It was much more measured and reasonable, wasn't it?
Yeah, and from the backbenches as well when this has come up in the past, and it does keep being raised in Parliament. I think that's why we as the Labour Party wanted to table this motion on Wednesday.
And Brian Paddock, some sort of deal involving some hundreds of refugees we can expect, I guess, to take shape in the course of the next couple of days. The scale of the refugee crisis in Syria, though, dwarfs such talk.
It is right that the priority of the coalition government has been to support refugees in the countries that they are in, and we are the second biggest donor of aid to Syria to help with that. But it mustn't be to the exclusion of allowing some refugees to come to this country if that is the only option.
So, just in a word, Kevin, when it comes to this debate, we'll expect to see the issue disarmed, at least in parliamentary British terms, before the vote.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it would look good if it was to descend in a divide between Labour and the coalition. I think it would look very
one
bad.
to watch on Wednesday and in the days leading up to then. That's us out of time, guys. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to us. You're listening to 5 Live. Stephen's next.